The filmmaking process. Overview. The filmmaking process is often spoken of as if it were linear, a clean five-step chain that begins with a bright idea and ends with an audience watching in awe. But the truth is, it is not a straight line. It is a cycle, a looping spiral of refinement, negotiation, invention, and compromise. Yet to map the terrain, we must begin with the formalized architecture: development, pre-production, production, post-production, and distribution. These stages are less a rigid staircase than overlapping ecosystems, each leaking into the next, each planting seeds that germinate later. To understand filmmaking as a craft and as an industry, you must see how this flow operates not as a set of disconnected silos, but as a pulsating organism where the circulatory system of creativity, money, time, and labor runs through every vein. Development is the primordial soup. It is here that the raw impulse, an idea sparked from a news headline, a personal memory, a strange dream, or even a commercial need, takes embryonic shape. Development involves the writing of treatments, the crafting of log lines designed to seduce financiers, the first draft scripts, the rewrites, the meetings, the pitch decks. In development, story and business are braided together. A writer might labor on dialogue while simultaneously an agent or producer calculates who might play the lead role and whether their star power can unlock foreign pre-sales. Development can last weeks, or it can linger for decades. Some projects die here, trapped forever in development hell, while others emerge quickly if the alignment of story, money, and timing clicks like a perfect lock. Hidden within development is a deep insight. Every decision here echoes downstream. If the concept is undercooked, every later stage, production, editing, even marketing, will feel the fracture. Think of it like pouring a foundation. A single crack can doom the structure no matter how much beauty is layered above it. Pre-production is the act of hardening intentions into plans. Here, the script is broken down scene by scene, location by location, into a production schedule. Casting directors circulate audition notices. Line producers estimate costs down to the last nail and sandwich. Department heads are hired. Pre-production is a battlefield of possibility. What will be practical effects? What will be digital? Should this scene be shot on location at 3 a.m. or replicated on a soundstage at noon? It is also a battlefield of psychology. Directors must earn trust from their crew. Investors must be reassured. Actors must be convinced they are joining not just a film, but a cultural artifact worth their time. Pre-production is where mood boards, storyboards, shot lists, production design sketches, costume fittings, camera tests, lighting simulations, and endless meetings crystallize into a shared vision. It is also the last relatively cheap stage to fix mistakes, because once the cameras roll, every wasted minute costs thousands. The hidden wisdom here: pre-production is less about planning in the abstract and more about stress testing every fantasy against reality until the fragile dream of the film becomes a logistical machine robust enough to survive chaos. Production is the circus, the fever dream, the time when the blueprint meets the resistance of reality. Crews gather at dawn, sets are built and dismantled in hours, cameras roll while sound engineers chase perfection, and actors conjure entire lifetimes in single takes. This is the most visible phase of filmmaking, but also the most misunderstood. The average audience imagines production as glamorous, the director calling action, and stars glowing under lights. But in reality, it is exhaustion. It is clock management. It is 1,000 micro-decisions made under impossible time pressure. Production is when weather ruins location shoots, when a camera lens fogs at the worst possible moment, when an actor's availability shrinks from 4 weeks to 2, when creative instincts must battle budgetary ceilings. The deeper insight: production is not the time for invention in broad strokes, but for disciplined improvisation. Yes, genius erupts. An actor ad-libs a line that becomes iconic. A shaft of sunlight breaks through the clouds to create a miraculous shot. But these moments only resonate because the scaffolding of pre-production has prepared the ground. Twilight Zone episodes thrived because production constraints forced ingenious creativity. Tight sets, limited budgets, yet lighting and framing that conjured infinity. Production is where pressure cooks brilliance. Post-production is the rewriting of the film without pen or paper. Editing is not simply trimming footage, but sculpting rhythm, deciding when an image should linger and when it should vanish in a cut. The film is rewritten in the edit bay. Entire subplots disappear, performances are recalibrated, endings are transformed. Sound design layers and atmospheres, Foley artists conjure footsteps and fabric rustles. Composers weave scores that tell the audience what emotions are beneath the surface. Color grading alters mood. Blue tints create coldness. Golden palettes suggest nostalgia. Visual effects extend worlds, hide seams, or sometimes rescue botched shots. The hidden truth is that in post, directors often discover what film they actually made rather than the one they thought they were making. A project that was meant to be comedy can skew toward tragedy. A tight thriller might evolve into a slow-burn meditation. Post-production is surgery and alchemy, an operation on the body of footage to extract its soul. Distribution is the bridge to the world. A film does not exist in isolation. It exists in the dialogue between itself and its audience. Distribution is securing theater slots, negotiating streaming rights, coordinating festival premieres, devising marketing campaigns that can compress 2 hours of cinematic complexity into a 30-second trailer. It is billboards, interviews, merchandise, cross-platform storytelling. Distribution is also political. What festivals will embrace the work, what critics will amplify it, what global regions will censor it, what algorithms will bury or elevate it. The deep lesson: distribution is not the final stage but the rebirth of the film as cultural artifact. A film unseen is a film unfinished. Distribution completes the cycle and simultaneously feeds back into development. For a film's reception dictates whether its creators are trusted with new projects, whether franchises spawn, whether new financing opens. To grasp this big picture, to hold all 5 phases in mind, is to understand that filmmaking is less about one step flowing into the next than about a choreography where every dancer must anticipate the other's moves. Development sets up the possibilities. Pre-production locks the geometry. Production battles the entropy of reality. Post-production reshapes the meaning. And distribution sends the work into the bloodstream of society. This overview is not simply a roadmap. It is a warning and a promise. Every error early compounds later. Every strong decision echoes throughout. By comprehending the whole, film students, interns, and professionals alike can see not just the artistry, but the systemic rigors required to manifest a story on screen. It is this systemic grasp that separates amateurs who dream from professionals who deliver. Concept and idea. Generation. Every film begins in the fragile silence of an idea. Before lights, cameras, budgets, or distribution strategies, there is that flicker of imagination, the spark that may come in a rush or whisper. To generate compelling concepts, filmmakers must learn to court the unconscious, wrestle with memory, and channel lived experience into something cinematic. Ideas cannot be forced into being, but they can be invited, cultivated, and sharpened. That is the essence of concept and idea generation. Creating the conditions in which inspiration strikes, and then learning how to translate that fleeting impression into a viable foundation for a full-length film. The process begins with brainstorming, but not in the superficial sense of quickly jotting random notions. True brainstorming in film is a layered excavation. Free writing is one of the oldest and most effective tools. Sitting down without censor, writing continuously for 10 or 20 minutes until the rational mind exhausts itself and deeper patterns emerge. This exercise often yields fragments, a single image, a line of dialogue, a memory of a place. Yet those fragments, stitched together, often form the kernel of a cinematic idea. Another strategy is mind mapping, placing a central word, say, betrayal or journey, and letting associative branches spill out in every direction. These branches, settings, characters, emotions, themes, show the hidden connections you might never have articulated in prose. But ideas are not born only from the mind. They are drawn from the world. Real-life events, headlines about unsolved mysteries, obscure historical incidents, even overheard conversations, can become the genesis of stories that feel authentic. A great many films have started with "what if?" questions inspired by reality. What if this crime had a different ending? What if this invention had fallen into the wrong hands? What if this relationship had unfolded another way? Literature, too, is a wellspring, though one must tread carefully. The goal is not to copy, but to transmute. A line of poetry may spark an entirely new narrative. A myth retold may be modernized into something unfamiliar. Personal experience is the richest source of all. The smallest childhood memory, a specific smell, a forgotten ritual, a local legend, can carry an emotional resonance powerful enough to sustain an entire film. When you arrive at a raw idea, the question becomes, is it cinematic? Not every great concept makes a great film. Some stories are better as novels, essays, or plays. To be cinematic, an idea must have a visual dimension, an element that can be embodied through imagery, performance, sound, and movement. A phone call might be riveting in real life, but on screen it needs tension, framing, cuts, and subtext to truly breathe. Evaluating an idea for film requires asking, can this premise sustain dramatic tension across 90 to 120 minutes? Does it have room for arcs, reversals, escalation, and climax? Can its essence be distilled into a logline that instantly conjures intrigue? This is where genre becomes critical. Every genre carries its own promise to the audience. A horror idea must generate fear not just once but repeatedly in escalating waves. A romantic comedy must find fresh variations on familiar tropes while building genuine emotional investment. A science fiction idea must open a conceptual horizon, a thought experiment about technology, society, or humanity that stretches across the runtime. Identifying genre early is not about constraining creativity, but about clarifying the contract with your future audience. Yet originality is not merely doing something no one has ever done. Total novelty is impossible. Cinema is built on centuries of narrative archetypes. Instead, originality is about making the familiar feel strange, the strange feel familiar. It is about weaving personal voice into universal patterns. The Twilight Zone was masterful at this. Each episode was rooted in an ordinary, even banal situation. A man at work, a couple on vacation, a family in their home. But by twisting one variable, it opened a portal to the uncanny. Those stories worked because they were relatable enough to feel grounded, yet surprising enough to destabilize expectations. That is the alchemy of originality, taking what is shared and infusing it with what is uniquely yours. The hidden insight here is that ideas require courage. Courage to chase thoughts that seem too strange, too small, or too impractical. Many filmmakers censor themselves at the outset, discarding sparks because they fear the market won't understand or the budget would be impossible. Yet some of the most celebrated films, independent, cult classics, and even blockbusters, began as unfilmable concepts. The key is not to dismiss but to refine, to shape the wild thought into something that balances vision with viability. This is why evaluation is a second stage of idea generation. Ask, who is the audience? What emotional journey does this premise promise? Does it align with the cultural moment? Can the story scale into a 2-hour experience without collapsing under repetition or exhaustion? By the end of this lecture, what should remain with you is not a formula but a discipline. To refine raw inspirations into solid cinematic concepts, to treat every dream, every observation, every fragment as potential clay, to resist dismissing ideas prematurely and instead subject them to a cycle of expansion through brainstorming, mapping, and inspiration gathering, and contraction through evaluation of genre, audience, and cinematic viability. The filmmaker is less a hunter of perfect ideas than a gardener of imperfect seeds, nurturing, pruning, and shaping them into structures capable of sustaining characters, arcs, and climaxes. From this soil of concept and idea generation, every film's success or failure is already prefigured. The idea is the DNA. Without strong DNA, no matter how dazzling the costumes, lighting, or editing, the organism will falter. But with it, the film becomes inevitable, as if the world itself demanded it exist. Defining the film's theme and message. Every story has a skeleton beneath its flesh, an invisible framework that gives it coherence and resonance. In cinema, that skeleton is the theme. The theme is not the plot, not the sequence of events, not the character's daily struggles. It is the underlying question, the heartbeat that drives meaning through the narrative. Great films are remembered not just for what happened in them, but for what they meant. When people emerge from a theater and say, "That film really stayed with me," what lingers is the theme, the emotional truth that burrowed into them. To define theme, you must begin by asking, what is this film about at its deepest level? Strip away the costumes, the dialogue, the locations. What remains? It might be love, justice, identity, transformation, revenge, freedom, or mortality. These are broad, almost archetypal notions. But the artistry of filmmaking lies in narrowing these universal ideas into specific, personal expressions. Love is too vague. But love expressed through the impossible distance of time, The Notebook, or through the alien lens of artificial intelligence, Her, or through grief over death, Ghost, becomes something memorable and particular. A theme is a compass. Once identified, it should guide every choice. Characters should embody or challenge it. Settings should mirror or counterpoint it. Tone should resonate with it. And the climax should resolve it, or deliberately leave it unresolved to provoke. Without this compass, a film risks becoming episodic, scattered, or hollow. You may have exciting sequences, witty lines, or beautiful cinematography, but the audience will walk away without clarity of purpose. Theme is what crystallizes disparate parts into a coherent whole. Consider the theme of identity. In Black Swan, identity is interrogated through a dancer's struggle between perfection and self-destruction. In Fight Club, identity fractures into consumerist alienation and violent rebellion. In Moonlight, identity unfolds through childhood, adolescence, and adulthood against cultural and personal pressures. The plot lines could not be more different, but the theme binds them. Each asks in its own way, who am I, and what does it cost to become myself? This is why theme resonates, because it asks questions that transcend the particularities of setting and plot. But defining theme is not enough. The craft is in weaving it subtly through the film. Heavy-handed moralizing kills art. Audiences reject stories that scream their lessons at them. The goal is to let the theme emerge naturally from character choices and plot progression. A character who consistently sacrifices personal happiness for others may reinforce a theme of selflessness. One who betrays their friends may underscore a theme of corruption. But the theme must arise organically, not be declared in dialogue like a thesis statement. The tone and style of a film are also inseparable from its theme. Imagine a film about uncertainty. The narrative might explore doubt and ambiguity, but if the visual style is bright, symmetrical, and overly polished, the thematic resonance will collapse. Instead, cinematography can underscore uncertainty. Handheld camera work that feels unstable, shadows that obscure clarity, abrupt editing rhythms that jolt the viewer. Alfred Hitchcock mastered this, using suspense not just as a storytelling device but as a thematic embodiment of paranoia and distrust. The Twilight Zone thrived because tone and theme were in lockstep. Eerie music, unsettling silence, stark lighting, all reinforcing themes of dislocation, irony, and cosmic justice. To craft a thematic backbone requires discipline. It begins with articulation, being able to write in one sentence what the film is truly about. This is a story about the cost of ambition. This is a story about what happens when justice fails. This is a story about the impossibility of controlling love. That articulation becomes the touchstone. Every decision, from costume to camera lens to sound design, must be tested against it. Does this reinforce the theme, or does it dilute it? Great filmmakers revisit their thematic compass constantly. In the editing room, scenes are cut not only for pacing but for thematic clarity. In marketing, posters and trailers hint at the theme as much as the plot, ensuring that the audience is primed to feel what the story ultimately intends to communicate. The hidden insight is this: Theme is the film's soul. Without it, you may have technical perfection but emotional emptiness. With it, even a rough, low-budget film can burn into memory. Theme is what transforms moving pictures into myth. It ensures that the film is not merely a diversion but a communication, a gift from artist to audience, a way of saying, "This is what I believe about the world." Crafting a logline and synopsis. If a theme is the soul of your film and the concept is its DNA, then the logline and synopsis are its calling card. The concise expression of the story's essence, the portable form in which it travels out into the world to meet gatekeepers, collaborators, financiers, and audiences. These forms are deceptively simple. A logline, often a single sentence, appears almost trivial at first glance. A synopsis, often a single page, may look like a skeletal summary. Yet the ability to compress a full-length cinematic idea into these compact forms is not merely an exercise in marketing. It is a crucible. It tests whether you truly understand the heart of your story. If you cannot articulate it in a few sentences, you probably do not yet understand it yourself. A logline is a distillation. One sentence, sometimes two if absolutely necessary, designed to convey the protagonist, their goal, the obstacle they face, and the stakes of failure or success. Think of it as a story's dramatic engine compacted into a nutshell. Consider Jaws. When a great white shark terrorizes a small resort town, a police chief, a marine scientist, and a grizzled fisherman must hunt it down before it kills again. In under 30 words, the characters, their goal, the antagonist, and the stakes are all crystal clear. Or The Godfather. The aging patriarch of an organized crime dynasty transfers control of his empire to his reluctant son. The stakes are both personal and epic. The conflict is embedded in the premise. The craft of writing a logline requires discipline and ruthless clarity. Start with the protagonist, not in terms of their backstory, but their role in the central conflict. Who are they in this narrative system? Then define their goal. What do they want more than anything? Survival, love, freedom, revenge? Next, articulate the obstacle. What force opposes them? It may be a person, a system, nature itself, or an internal flaw. Finally, name the stakes. What will be lost if they fail, or what will be gained if they succeed? These four elements together make a logline pulse. Without stakes, there is no urgency. Without an obstacle, no drama. Without a goal, no momentum. But brevity is not enough. A great logline is also enticing. It must hook. This is where specificity matters. A man tries to win back his ex is generic. A failed magician attempts to win back his ex by staging a final performance that may kill him is vivid. The hidden truth. A logline must not only explain but seduce. Its economy must leave the reader curious, compelled to imagine the film. Once the logline is refined, the next step is the synopsis. Unlike the logline, the synopsis can breathe. Usually one page, it expands on the logline by sketching out the arc of the story. Setup, conflict, climax, and resolution. It introduces the key characters and the primary plot beats, but without drowning in subplots or excessive detail. The synopsis is not the full script. It is a roadmap, an aerial view. Its purpose is to prove that the logline's promise is deliverable across the structure of a film. The setup in a synopsis introduces the world and the protagonist. Conflict escalates as obstacles pile up. The climax reveals the decisive confrontation. And the resolution shows the consequences, whether triumphant, tragic, or ambiguous. All of this must fit into one page. Again, compression forces clarity. If your synopsis feels bloated, it is a warning sign that the story may lack focus or cohesion. Conversely, if your synopsis flows cleanly, it affirms that the narrative spine is strong. Writing these documents also strengthens your storytelling in a hidden way. The process of boiling down a sprawling idea into a logline or a synopsis forces you to identify the core engine of your film. Many writers discover, in this process, that what they thought was the heart of their story is actually peripheral, and a different conflict or relationship must be centered. Others discover gaps, a lack of stakes, a weak antagonist, an unclear goal. In this sense, crafting the logline and synopsis is not just a sales exercise but a diagnostic tool. The logline and synopsis also serve as alignment mechanisms. In development meetings, they keep everyone, from producers to financiers to actors, focused on the same vision. On set, they remind the crew of the big picture. In marketing, they seed trailers and taglines. They are not just preliminary exercises, they echo throughout the life cycle of the film. Think of a logline as the DNA strand, compact and powerful, and the synopsis as the skeleton, outlining the shape of the body. Without them, scripts often meander, characters wander without purpose, and films collapse into incoherence. With them, you have a compass that guides every creative decision, keeping the narrative aligned with its essence. By the end of this lecture, what you should carry with you is this: the ability to articulate your story in its most concise and compelling form is as critical as writing the full script. A strong logline and synopsis are not just external tools to pitch your story. They are internal tests of its strength. If you can define it, you can write it. If you cannot, the story is not yet ready. Building a compelling story foundation. Every film that has ever captured the imagination, every film that lingers in memory long after the credits roll, has been built upon a strong story foundation. Without that foundation, no amount of dazzling cinematography, clever dialogue, or high-profile acting can rescue the film from collapse. A story without foundation is a house without a frame. It may stand for a moment, but it cannot endure. In this lecture, we examine the fundamental architecture that underlies every powerful film: the inciting incident, the conflict, the stakes, the rising tension, and the causality that binds it all together. The first component is the inciting incident. This is the spark that lights the fuse, the moment that disrupts the ordinary world and demands that a story be told. It is the question to which the entire film is an answer. Without an inciting incident, the audience has no reason to care, no reason to follow. In The Matrix, it is Neo being contacted by Morpheus. In The Lion King, it is the murder of Mufasa. In Casablanca, it is Ilsa walking into Rick's cafe. The inciting incident does not need to be large in spectacle, but it must be seismic in effect. It must destabilize the protagonist's life and set into motion the chain of causality that drives the narrative forward. Once the inciting incident occurs, we enter the realm of conflict and stakes. A story foundation is built not on circumstances but on resistance. Without conflict, there is no movement, no growth, no drama. Conflict can be external, a villain, an enemy, a disaster, or internal, as in the protagonist's struggle against their own fears, flaws, or contradictions. Stakes transform conflict into urgency. Stakes are the consequences of failure. They can be literal: death, imprisonment, loss of love, or existential. The collapse of self, the shattering of identity, the forfeiting of purpose. The stakes must be clear to the protagonist and, more importantly, to the audience. Only then does every beat of the film become compelling. A strong story foundation also requires rising action, a carefully constructed escalation of obstacles, reversals, and complications. Rising action is not simply a series of random events, but a deliberate architecture of tension. Each obstacle must grow naturally from the one before. Each conflict must force the protagonist into harder decisions. Each reversal must cut deeper. Rising action is the rhythm of struggle, the heartbeat of momentum. It ensures that the story does not plateau or stall, but climbs inexorably toward the climax. Hitchcock referred to this as playing the audience like a piano. Each rising note of tension primes the next until the crescendo becomes unavoidable. But none of this works without causality. The hallmark of a weak film is a story that feels episodic or disconnected, where scenes are linked by coincidence rather than consequence. A compelling story spine insists that each event leads logically to the next. This is not to say that everything is predictable. On the contrary, causality can deliver the greatest surprises, because when the shock comes, the audience sees instantly how inevitable it was all along. The brilliance of The Sixth Sense was not simply the twist ending, but the realization that every prior scene had pointed toward it. That is causality. The sense that the story is not just happening but unfolding with necessity. Beyond these fundamentals lies the art of balance. Films must balance pace, lingering enough on emotion to let it resonate, but moving quickly enough to maintain engagement. They must balance subplots, which add texture and dimension but can overwhelm if not carefully woven into the main spine. Subplots should echo or contrast the central theme, not distract from it. And films must balance empathy for characters, making them relatable enough for us to invest in their journey, yet flawed enough for growth to matter. The hidden insight is that Story Foundation is not about formula, but about inevitability and resonance. A film feels strong not when it follows a checklist, but when it builds a structure that feels both surprising and inevitable, both personal and universal. A strong story spine makes the audience feel that no other version of events could have happened, that every beat was destined, that the film was not written but discovered. By the end of this lecture, you should understand that building a story foundation is not just a matter of planning. It is the act of giving your film a spine, a backbone that can carry the weight of everything else you will build. Inciting incidents spark the journey. Conflict and stakes fuel it. Rising tension propels it. Causality binds it. Balance sustains it. With these in place, your film is not merely a collection of scenes but a living organism, inevitable in its unfolding and unforgettable in its impact. Story structure and the three-act framework. When you watch a great film, you may not consciously notice its structure, but you feel it. The rhythm of tension and release, the mounting anticipation, the satisfying resolution, all of these are anchored in story structure. Structure is not a cage, it is a skeleton. It provides a stability so the flesh of characters and the spirit of theme can move freely without collapsing into chaos. Of all structural paradigms, none has been more influential than the three-act framework: setup, confrontation, and resolution. Its durability is no accident. For centuries, audiences across cultures have gravitated toward this rhythm because it mirrors how we experience life. Beginning, middle, and end. Act 1. The setup. The first act introduces the world, the characters, and the rules of engagement. This is where tone is established, where we learn what normal life looks like before the disruption arrives. The inciting incident usually strikes here, around 10-15 minutes into a film, destabilizing the protagonist's world and forcing a choice. Act Y closes with the first plot point, the moment when the protagonist fully commits to the journey, leaving behind the ordinary world and stepping into the story's central conflict. Think of Dorothy crossing into Oz, Neo taking the red pill, or Luke Skywalker leaving Tatooine. These are not just narrative beats, they are points of no return. Act 2. The confrontation. This act comprises the bulk of the story, usually 50–60% of the runtime. Here, the protagonist encounters escalating obstacles, allies, enemies, and subplots. The central conflict deepens. What makes Act 2 notoriously difficult for writers is the risk of the sagging middle, where momentum slows and tension dissipates. To avoid this, the second act is often divided into two halves by the midpoint, a transformative event that raises the stakes and shifts the protagonist's understanding of the conflict. In Jurassic Park, the midpoint is when the power fails and the dinosaurs escape. In Titanic, it is the iceberg collision. The midpoint re-energizes the narrative, ensuring the audience remains engaged through escalation. Act 2 closes with the second plot point, usually a low moment for the protagonist. This is often called the darkest hour. The hero faces defeat, betrayal, loss, or near death. In The Dark Knight, it is Rachel's death. In The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, it is the overwhelming sense of defeat before reinforcements arrive. The second plot point tightens the noose, preparing the stage for the climax. Act 3. The resolution. The final act is where all conflicts converge. The protagonist confronts their greatest obstacle in the climax, the story's highest point of tension. This is the decisive battle, literal or metaphorical, where the stakes are resolved. After the climax, the resolution follows, tying loose ends, showing the aftermath, and delivering the thematic message. A resolution should feel earned, inevitable yet surprising, aligning with the story's thematic core. Films that rush or botch this act leave audiences unsatisfied, no matter how strong the build-up. The three-act structure is powerful because it reflects human psychology. We crave beginnings that orient us, middles that challenge us, and endings that resolve us. It is a pattern rooted in oral tradition, theater, and myth. Aristotle's Poetics articulated the importance of beginning, middle, and end centuries ago. Modern screenwriters like Sid Field and Robert McKee simply codified what audiences already intuitively felt. Yet structure does not mean rigidity. There are alternative structures, non-linear narratives like Pulp Fiction, circular narratives like Memento, or anthology films that braid multiple storylines. These experiments challenge the paradigm but often succeed precisely because they know the rules they are breaking. Even in fractured narratives, echoes of the three-act rhythm can often be felt beneath the surface. A non-linear film may scramble time, but still deliver a setup, confrontation, and resolution in disguised form. The hidden wisdom of structure is not to view it as formula, but as blueprint. Key turning points, inciting incident, first plot point, midpoint, second plot point, climax, are not arbitrary but natural hinges of human engagement. They keep stories from stalling, wandering, or ending abruptly. They give writers markers to aim for and audiences anchors to hold on to. By the end of this lecture, you should grasp that the three-act framework is not about conformity but about clarity. It ensures momentum, coherence, and emotional payoff. Structure is invisible when done well, but its absence is glaring. It is the rhythm beneath the music of cinema, the architecture that allows stories to soar. Foreshadowing and payoff. Chekhov's gun. Foreshadowing is one of the most deceptively simple yet profoundly powerful tools in the filmmaker's arsenal. It is the art of planting a seed early so that, when it flowers later, the audience feels both surprise and inevitability at once. It is the invisible scaffolding that supports narrative cohesion, the whispered promise that the story will honor its own architecture. At its core, foreshadowing ensures that a film does not feel like a collection of disconnected events, but a woven fabric where each thread has its place, and where the audience subconsciously senses connections long before they are made explicit. The most famous articulation of this principle is Chekhov's gun. Anton Chekhov, the Russian playwright, famously wrote that if in the first act there is a gun hanging on the wall, by the second or third act it must go off. Otherwise, it should not be there at all. This deceptively simple rule encodes a deeper truth about narrative. Nothing should be superfluous, and everything that draws the audience's attention should have purpose. The gun need not always be literal. It may be a character's peculiar habit, a half-heard line of dialogue, or an unusual prop. What matters is that once it has been introduced into the story world, the audience expects resolution, consciously or unconsciously. The psychology of foreshadowing. Why does foreshadowing work so powerfully? Because human beings are pattern-making creatures. Our brains are constantly scanning for connections, searching for causality, predicting outcomes. When a filmmaker plants an element early, the audience notes it, even if only faintly, and begins to anticipate its return. When the payoff finally arrives, the brain experiences satisfaction, a release of dopamine, as though it has solved a puzzle. The more subtle the setup, the greater the sense of reward when the payoff occurs. Conversely, when a story introduces details that never resolve, audiences feel betrayed, as if a promise has been broken. This is why sloppy screenwriting, where a character's backstory is mentioned but never matters, or a mysterious object is shown but never used, leaves viewers dissatisfied even if they cannot articulate why. Foreshadowing also creates inevitability. The ending of a film feels justified when we can look back and see that it was seeded from the beginning. Consider The Sixth Sense. The twist, that Bruce Willis's character is dead, would feel cheap if it had not been meticulously foreshadowed. His wife never speaking directly to him, his inability to interact with objects, the red color motif. These clues make the twist feel not like a trick but like a revelation. Chekhov's gun, in practice. Let us examine some classic examples. In Jaws, the oxygen tank introduced early as part of the shark cage equipment becomes the very device used in the climax to kill the shark. In The Lord of the Rings, Bilbo's gifting of Sting and the mithril vest to Frodo pays off in critical survival moments later. In Die Hard, McClane's barefoot vulnerability, set up when he removes his shoes, is paid off during the broken glass scene. Notice that in each case the setup feels organic. The oxygen tank is introduced naturally in the context of shark hunting. The vest is a gift from an uncle. The shoes are removed in a moment of rest. Nothing screams, "This will matter later." Yet when the payoff comes, the audience recalls the earlier moment and experiences a jolt of recognition. Chekhov's gun is not about cluttering a film with hints. It is about discipline, ensuring that if you draw attention to something, it must matter. The inverse is also true. Not everything needs to pay off, but nothing highlighted should be wasted. Types of foreshadowing. Foreshadowing can operate on multiple levels. 1. Direct foreshadowing. Clear hints about future events. In Macbeth, the witch's prophecy explicitly foreshadows Macbeth's rise and fall. In film, this can be a character ominously stating, "This will be the last time I see you." 2. Symbolic foreshadowing. Objects or visuals that symbolically prefigure later events. A cracked mirror might foreshadow a fractured identity. Storm clouds gathering may suggest conflict ahead. 3. Character-based foreshadowing. Traits or habits that later play a role in the climax. In Home Alone, Kevin's obsession with setting up booby traps foreshadows his eventual defense of the house. 4. Dialogue as foreshadowing. A seemingly throwaway line that later proves crucial. In Breaking Bad, a casual reference to ricin becomes a thread that runs through seasons. 5. Atmospheric foreshadowing. The overall mood or tone preparing the audience for what is to come. Horror films are masters of this. Lingering shots, eerie music, or unexplained silences prepare us for dread. Avoiding the pitfalls. The danger of foreshadowing is telegraphing. If the setup is too obvious, the audience feels ahead of the story. They predict the twist long before it lands, and the payoff loses impact. The art is in subtlety, planting without signaling. In The Godfather, Michael's handling of a gun behind a bathroom toilet is foreshadowed just enough to build tension without revealing the certainty of what will happen. Another pitfall is clutter. Amateur screenwriters often scatter guns on the wall everywhere, introducing so many details that the audience cannot track them all. The result is either confusion or disappointment when only a few pay off. Discipline demands restraint. Choose a handful of key elements and ensure they resonate. The payoff. The payoff must be satisfying. This does not mean it must be happy. Satisfaction comes from coherence, from the sense that the story has honored its own logic. When the poisoned wine glass in The Princess Bride pays off in the Battle of Wits, it delights because it is both clever and inevitable. When the spinning top in Inception is reintroduced at the end, it unsettles because it forces us to question everything that came before. The timing of payoff is crucial. Too soon, and the setup feels wasted. Too late, and the audience forgets the setup. The sweet spot is when the audience recalls the setup just as the payoff unfolds. This produces the electric spark of recognition. Thematic foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is not limited to plot mechanics. It can also reinforce theme. In Citizen Kane, the snow globe introduced at the beginning foreshadows Kane's yearning for innocence and lost childhood, culminating in Rosebud. In Get Out, the casual mention of deer foreshadows both the deer collision and the thematic critique of dehumanization. Hidden insights. The hidden power of foreshadowing is that it creates a subconscious contract with the audience. Even viewers who miss the setup consciously feel it subconsciously. This creates what some theorists call a shadow memory, a faint trace that makes the payoff resonate more deeply than logic alone could explain. Foreshadowing also reflects how memory works in real life. We constantly assign meaning to past events when new events occur. The mind reorders significance. Films that use foreshadowing effectively mimic this psychological process, giving them a sense of realism even when fantastical. Conclusion. Foreshadowing is not ornamentation, it is architecture. It strengthens narrative structure, enhances emotional impact, and builds audience trust. By mastering it, filmmakers create stories that feel cohesive, inevitable, and deeply satisfying.